Perfect. So again, my name is Kelsey Ashton. I'm with the Jefferson County Public Libraries, and I'm very excited to present tonight's program in conjunction with Jefferson County Public Health to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine and answer many of the questions that are in all of our minds. So let's just get started by introducing our panelists. So I'm going to let each of our panelists do a really quick introduction of themselves, and I'm going to call on you, Jane Barnes, to get us started.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here to talk about vaccines, which is COVID vaccines are my favorite topic these days, I think. I am the Executive Director of Benefits in Action. We're an organization that assists people in navigating the healthcare system and healthcare benefits. So this is a natural fit to us, and I'm here as a community ambassador. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And then next up, I'd like to have Dr. Margaret Huffman introduce herself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you're with us tonight. I am the Director of the Community Health Services Division at Jefferson County Public Health, which is our public health nursing division. And I'm happy to be with you tonight to talk about COVID vaccines. I have been in the work of vaccines for 25 years, and I'm very excited to be part of this process of rolling out the COVID-19 vaccine. Happy to hear your questions and to help walk through all your issues with this tonight, and looking forward to our conversation.
Great, thank you so much. And then next, I'd like to ask Dr. Catherine Lee to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Kelsey, and I'm really happy to be here this evening. So my name is Catherine Lee, and by way of training, I have a PhD in infectious diseases. I spent the majority of my career in academia at the University of Colorado in the Department of Pediatrics, where I studied varicella-zoster virus for about a decade. More recently, I have joined the pharmaceutical industry, and in my current role, I am a medical science liaison supporting Sanofi's vaccine portfolio. As part of the medical affairs team, my job is to educate about all vaccine preventable diseases. So I felt that I could contribute some of my knowledge to this program this evening. So I am very happy to be here. I will also say that anything that I'm saying this evening is, they are my views only and not reflective of Sanofi. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And then I'd like to ask Mary Rether to introduce herself.
Hi, good evening. I'm Mary Ruther, and I'm here as a community member. I've lived in Lakewood over 50 years. That's kind of scary. And I have had the vaccination, so I'm happy to answer any questions about my experience with that.
Super, thank you so much. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so that we can see one another and focus on the folks who are talking. So I'm Kelsey Ashton, and I'm going to moderate this evening. I'd like to get started with a question for Dr. Lee. Just to get us started on the same page, can you briefly tell us what the COVID-19 vaccine is and how it works?
I would be happy to, Kelsey. So I think the first thing I want to say about any of the COVID vaccines is that you cannot get COVID from them. I know that's a concern for a lot of individuals, but there is no possibility to actually contract the virus from these vaccines. So until just over the weekend, there were 2 vaccines that have been approved that were using the mRNA platform. It is a new technology, and I will just say that mRNA is a naturally occurring, it's naturally occurring in our bodies, and our cells use it to make proteins that we need, to function. And so, there is no harm in terms of mRNA potentially incorporating into, our genome. I know there's a lot of concern around that. That's not possible because the mRNA doesn't actually go into the nucleus of our cells. It stays out in the cytoplasm, where it will encode for the protein that we know will elicit very protective responses, which is called the spike protein. And so this messenger RNA encodes the spike protein so that our bodies can make antibodies to this particular protein. So both the Moderna as well as Pfizer vaccines use this mRNA technology. Just over the weekend, on Friday, the FDA issued an emergency use authorization, and over the weekend, the CDC's Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices made recommendations for the third approved COVID vaccine, which is from Janssen. And this vaccine is different in terms of the platform that it uses to make the spike protein. So here, the platform utilizes a common cold virus called an adenovirus to express or carry the spike protein into our bodies. And in the same way that the mRNA vaccines do, once that spike protein is made, our antibodies are then able to generate antibodies towards that spike protein, and that's how these vaccines protect us.
Great. And then a quick follow-up. Are the vaccines safe?
So yes, that's another great question, Kelsey, and I know there have been a lot of concerns around that as well. Given again how quickly these vaccines were made available to us, it's really remarkable. I still can't believe that in less than a year that we have such highly efficacious and safe vaccines. So yes, the process to approve vaccines for use goes through a very rigorous, stepwise protocol. And although the time has been reduced, there have been no steps that have been skipped in terms of ensuring that these vaccines are safe and efficacious. So there are various, in addition to the clinical trials that were conducted, where safety had to be monitored for at least 2 months, post, whether it was 2 doses for the mRNA vaccines or the 1 dose for the Janssen vaccine, the subjects in the studies had to be monitored for at least 2 months for safety. And during those clinical trials, there were no concerns in terms of safety. Most subjects experienced local reactions such as soreness at the site of injection, maybe some fatigue, headache. In some rare cases, there were some experiences of anaphylaxis, but these were mostly individuals who had previously experienced these kinds of reactions towards other ingredients or other vaccines. So yes, overall, all these vaccines are highly efficacious and highly safe for use.
Thank you. And I know I said quick question. That was not a quick, easy question. So thank you.
That's okay. It's an important one. It's a very important one.
So my next question is for you, Dr. Huffman. I'm wondering what the timeline is for rolling the vaccine out here in Colorado. When can I get the vaccine?
Thank you so much for that question, and it's a really good question. I want to emphasize that in Colorado, we are continuing to do our reach into what we are calling phase 1A, which are the highest risk healthcare workers and individuals who have direct contact with COVID-19 patients and who have who may work in a long-term care facility, both those staff and residents. Phase 1B.1 are Coloradans age 70 plus who are moderate risk healthcare workers and first responders. Our data shows that people over 70 were making up the majority of our hospitalizations from COVID-19. And so we were really reaching out into that group to make sure that they were receiving the first offers of vaccine because they had the most at risk. Phase 1B2 were the Coloradans aged 65 to 69, as well as our educators and childcare workers in licensed childcare programs and continuity of state government. Those phases have all been underway, and then starting on Friday, 1B3 are people age 60 and older, frontline essential workers in grocery and agriculture, and people 16 through 59 with 2 or more high-risk conditions. 1B4 will be rolled out later on in March. All of this, of course, is dependent on the number of doses we receive in the state. And with the addition of the Janssen vaccine, that gives us 3 different products, which we are able to provide out to our residents in Colorado. So I think what we need to do is just really have conversations about when you individually might be ready, but broadly speaking, right now, starting Friday, we will be looking at people age 60 and older, frontline essential workers in grocery and agriculture, and then people 16 through 59 with 2 or more high-risk conditions. And those typically are defined as being those conditions that have that are around cancer, chronic kidney disease, diabetes types 1 and 2, specific heart conditions, obesity, pregnancy, sickle cell disease, solid organ transplant, individuals with disabilities who require direct care in their home, and people with disabilities that prevent them from wearing masks. So please speak with your provider if you have questions about whether your conditions qualify for that. And then the 1B4 is a very large group, and we anticipate, again, that being available later on this month, probably by the 3rd or 4th week of March.
Great, thank you. And a follow-up for you, if I am not ready to commit to getting the vaccine, although I'm eligible, will I be able to get it down the road?
Absolutely. We want everyone to receive the vaccine when they're ready to receive it. And even though we've moved on beyond, say, exactly phase 1A, if you did not receive your vaccine and you're working in a long-term care facility, you are absolutely ready to get it now. And we would not turn that away just because we're moving on down the roster.
Thank you. So the next question I have here is for you, Dr. Lee. And I'm shortening up what I had initially planned to ask because you already answered some of my question. But which of the vaccines should I get?
Thank you for that question, Kelsey. I've been hearing that a lot. I'm sure everyone is very familiar with all the, the efficacies for these different vaccines being reported in the news. And, with the Pfizer and Moderna, it was remarkable to, for them to be able to achieve such high efficacy around 95%. It's pretty unheard of for vaccines, and so I think with the more recent vaccines, including the Janssen one, where the overall vaccine efficacy was slightly lower, people are questioning, well, should I be waiting to try to get one of the, mRNA vaccines that have higher efficacy? And my answer, very short and sweet, is get whichever vaccine you can get right now that you're eligible to get. These numbers that are reported are for overall efficacy, which means, preventing symptomatic COVID. So COVID where you would present with symptoms. But I think that the messaging really needs to be around the ability of these vaccines to prevent against severe illness and hospitalizations and ultimately death. It's very similar for our influenza vaccines. People hear, varying efficacies from season to season, maybe 30 to 50%, depending on the season, and they say, oh, well, it doesn't work, so I'm not going to bother getting it. Well, what's really important, just like in this situation with COVID, is that influenza vaccines do a really great job of preventing against severe illness, right? So hospitalizations and death. And that's exactly the same scenario here. And all of these vaccines have remarkably high efficacy against preventing severe disease. So really, I think if you are eligible to get, any of these vaccines, they are all equally efficacious. They're all equally safe. And the best vaccine that you can get is the one that you can get a hold of first, right? Because if you could get vaccinated earlier, that protects, ourselves individually from getting sick, but also our community, right, which is really important. And that's how we're ultimately going to get over this pandemic.
Thank you. So I know we touched a little bit on, well, we've talked about the different options of vaccine as well as side effects. Mary, I would like to ask you, as someone who's received the vaccine, which vaccine did you get and did you experience any side effects?
I had the Moderna vaccine, and the only side effect was a sore arm the next day. And that was all, no swelling of the arm or redness or anything, just the sore arm.
And then Dr. Lee, to throw this back at you, I know you touched on a few of the side effects that are possible, but are there any additional side effects that should be mentioned or possible long-term side effects?
So in terms of the additional side effects, other than the ones that I've mentioned, there are various safety monitoring systems that are in place to be able to capture any continuous, safety signals that might appear in recipients of these vaccines. And right now, there is nothing that is striking or, an imbalance in terms of those vaccine recipients and those individuals who have not received the vaccine, so the placebo controls. In terms of long-term side effects, I think it's too early for us to say, given that, again, some of these vaccines have only been around, a month or two, right? We have to wait for these individuals to receive both of their doses in terms of the mRNA vaccines, and then the Janssen one hopefully be made available starting this week. So we'll have to continue to monitor, but rest assured there are various different reporting systems in place to continue to capture this information.
Thank you. And Mary, thank you for sharing your experience. So Jane, my next question is for you. I'm wondering what some of the challenges are that you're hearing from community members as far as trying to sign up to receive the vaccine.
It's a challenging process. That's really the best that I can say. It's really confusing for community members. It's confusing for all of us. Every one of our large healthcare systems has their own methodology for signing up. You don't have to be a patient or a member of any one system to take their vaccine or be vaccinated from them. And that's really confusing to people. It feels a little like the lottery. Some people have been on a list for a very long time and never get a call. Some people call one day and they say, we can see you at 2 o'clock today. And nobody knows kind of why that happens or why it doesn't happen. I think we're starting to see some patterns to different kinds of appointment times being released, but it's been slow coming. And I think actually the huge challenge is for people who don't have access to the internet and who are very confused about the process. So we spend a lot of time. I've actually trained a number of volunteers to help folks navigate the system. So we take a lot of calls from community members and help them just figure out where the best place, what's closest to them, and how they can best access a vaccine. So we don't really talk about which vaccine you'd like. We're just trying to get them in to an appointment at this point. That's been the easiest thing. Then the other challenge is most of the healthcare providers can return your appointment with an email. So for folks who don't have emails, don't quite know how to access that, that's been a challenge as well. So I think we've learned a lot through this whole process about serving, especially older adults, the older adult particularly, who may not have access to that kind of technology, and how to be inclusive. We really need to be thoughtful about how we set up systems moving forward.
And so to flip that on the opposite side, are there any potential solutions or approaches that you might recommend community members take to kind of navigate those challenges?
I think that there are a number of places that are sort of popping up to help folks navigate. Remember, you don't have to pay for this vaccine. Really important to keep that in mind. Nobody should be charging you for this. But just if you can find somebody that can help you navigate it and figure out how to do the portals to register for an appointment. The other thing I think that's been really kind of concerning to folks is the kind of information that many of those portals request. It's a lot of personal information. I think we've done a really good job of telling community members not to release that information to people that they don't know. And then now we're asking for it. So, I think that feels a little disconcerting to folks to give their Medicare numbers or their health plan numbers, in some instances, their mother's maiden name, which makes people really, really concerned. So I've had a lot of people call me back, or a child of theirs call me back and say, why did you ask for this information? The mother should never have given that to you. So, we try to explain to them up front that these portals, we don't, at Benefits in Action, we don't save any of that personal information. It all goes into the healthcare system.
And I'm going to keep you on the spot, Jane. You made me think of another question. What are scams that are happening right now? What should people be on the lookout for, and how can they avoid them?
Get you a vaccine if you'll send me $50 today. I mean, scams, as soon as we have a solution to a problem, we have a scam, right? So that's why I just keep saying, please don't ever think you have to charge for this. There are no charges for these vaccines. You can also go anywhere to get it. I think the governor of Colorado, Governor Polis, has been quite clear about that no one can turn you away because you don't live in that city, you don't go to that health system, you don't shop at that grocery store, any of those kinds of things. So you are welcome at any of the vaccine sites if you can get an appointment. So I think charging is the big scam we're seeing particularly.
All right, thank you. So Mary, I have a question for you. As someone who's received the vaccine, what reassurance or encouragement would you offer to people who are unsure about getting the vaccine?
Well, I'll tell you how I decided to have the vaccine. I'm not someone who runs to get every shot, simply because I'm afraid of the needle itself, not the side effects. I really trust in the professionals to make it safe. But this process and this vaccine seemed so important at so many different levels. Of course, I personally want to be able to go travel. I want to be able to see friends I haven't seen and feel safe in doing that. But more importantly, the economy. I worry about that, and our businesses and our families who don't have jobs and can't feed their kids, that sort of thing. So I guess the social responsibility that's connected to this was really paramount to me making this decision. And I kind of think we're seeing the results of it already. The more people that are getting vaccinated, the more restrictions are being lifted. And I think we're starting to get back to some sort of a normal. So that's why I did it. And I would encourage everybody to do it and not worry about the side effects.
Thank you, Mary. All right, so I wasn't sure who to ask this question of, so this is open to any and all of you. So after I get the vaccine, do I have to continue wearing a mask and socially distancing, or can I get back to kind of living normal life?
Hey, this is Margaret. I can take a first crack at that, Kelsey, and I'd be happy if any of the others on the panel would like to hop in on and chime in and add to what I say. I look at this as layers of Swiss cheese. So think about a piece of Swiss cheese has holes in it, but if you layer several of them on top of each other, then you're fully covered. So you do need to continue to wear your mask and to socially distance even after you get your vaccine to really fully protect yourself and those around you and those that you love. So it's a very important message that we want to continue that people do maintain that distancing, that they do work from home if possible, that if it's not possible to work remotely, that you are staying home when you're sick, and that you are absolutely taking those other public health prevention messages to heart and just layering everything on top of each other to keep yourself and your family safe.
I absolutely agree with everything Margaret just said. We have to remain vigilant. continue, hand washing and avoiding, crowded spaces or large gatherings. And part of the reason is while the vaccines do provide protection, there are a lot of things we still don't know, right, in terms of how these vaccines work. One of which is, do the vaccines actually prevent transmission, right, of the virus? So you may still potentially carry the virus even though you're not symptomatic, right? And therefore, you could still be spreading the virus to other naive individuals. The other thing we don't know about these vaccines is how long they provide protection for, right? I mean, the hope is that they get us through, quote unquote, a season, but we don't really know what that picture looks like either. And so, these are two additional reasons that I think we need to continue to practice these safe distancing measures.
Thank you. I like the Swiss cheese analogy. That's a great visual. All right. So again, for anyone on the panel, I'm wondering what you need to provide or give the healthcare provider, I guess that's the best way to put it, in order to get signed up for the vaccine. Specifically, do I need a government issued photo ID? Do I need to have health insurance? I know, Jane, you've already said I don't need to pay anything.
You don't need to have health insurance. You don't need to have a government issued ID. We ask a lot of questions, but a lot of them are optional if you don't have answers to those. So really the goal, at least in Colorado, is to be sure that as many folks, as many Coloradans as possible can be vaccinated. So I think almost all the barriers to receiving that vaccine have been eliminated or reduced as much as possible. So I think that's great for our state. Lots of folks who are more vulnerable, perhaps are living in households with more people, are at work these days and have to go to a job where they have to go to the workplace and are exposed to a lot of other people, are certainly some of the folks that we want to receive the vaccine as well.
And I think I'm just going to add something to that. I think that's really important because we know that there are disparities, right, in terms of how the virus affects different populations and again, access. And so not having to have insurance, not having to provide ID, those will help reduce some of those barriers to access to these vaccines.
So just a follow-up to that, if I have a friend or community member, a neighbor who might be an undocumented individual, are they able to get the vaccine?
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
No questions asked.
So let's see. I have a couple more questions here and then we'll open it up to the audience. So I've heard the term herd immunity. Can someone elaborate on that for me and just explain what that is and how it impacts our community?
I'd be happy to try to answer that question, Kelsey. So herd immunity, or what we also refer to it as community immunity, is when there is a certain percentage of the community that has been protected, has achieved protection either through natural infection or through vaccination. And so I'm sure there's been a lot of information that you've gathered from the news around what that percentage needs to be, right, in order for us to achieve herd immunity against SARS-CoV-2. So based on the information, I believe for SARS-CoV-2, it needs to be somewhere between 60 and 70%, right? And that has to do, again, with the infection rate and also, again, how many then people need to either get naturally infected or receive a vaccine to be able to protect those individuals who have not either been infected or who have not received the vaccine, what we call naive individuals. So we really need the community, the large percentage of the community, to provide protection to those individuals around them who have not been infected and are naive. And so that's what ultimately vaccination does, whether it's COVID vaccines or influenza vaccines or any of the other vaccines. That's how they work, is to generate a level of protection in the majority of the population so that everyone in the community can then be protected. Because not everyone can receive vaccines, right? For one reason or another. And so this way, by having a large percentage of the community protected, that will then translate to providing protection for those individuals who can't be vaccinated or who have not been infected yet.
I like that phrase, community immunity. That's a great descriptor. Thank you, Dr. Lee. So a couple more questions and we'll see where we are with our attendees and their questions. So for the individuals who are giving the vaccines, actually administering them, is there a special training? Are they qualified in some special way to do that? And that's for anyone on the panel.
Yes, absolutely. You do have to be licensed to administer a vaccine in Colorado. And so you can rest assured that the person who is administering your vaccine is trained and licensed to do so. We have all kinds of training regarding the specific vaccine preparation that might be out there, whether that's the Pfizer vaccine or Moderna or the one that's coming on the market, the Janssen vaccine. So just as you would for any other routine vaccination, there is a high level of training, lots of shadowing and onboarding that's part of the process to ensure that someone is administering the vaccine safely and effectively.